as a species evolved, not separately from, but with the evolutionary paths of nearly every other organism on the face of the earth. We wouldn't be who we are if we didn't have our pets, or we didn't have animals that would do our manual labor, or animals that we ate to get a larger brain, historically speaking. We wouldn't have shade in the summertime, and we wouldn't have oxygen creating species had it not been for plants. We need them, plants and animals, but above and beyond that, I think we have an obligation to protect the natural environment as much as we can. We can't keep going on through greed and through a profit-driven society and culture. We need to look at the big picture. We need to see in that bigger picture what's really important.